back to Sustainability Matters. I'm Tria Case. Today we're talking about biodiversity, the vast interconnected web of life that sustains our planet. It's in the forests, the wetlands, shorelines, and even the sidewalks of New York City. Biodiversity is essential to clean air, water, stable climates, and strong communities, yet it's under threat. In this episode, we'll meet with scientists and advocates working to preserve species on land and at sea, and to engage people to protect nature right where they live. Let's begin with an overview from Andrew Falzone.
In all the infinite universe, our planet, Earth, is the only one known to support life. And while there may be some being waiting to be discovered somewhere out there, here on Earth across a variety of habitats, from oceans and lakes to green jungles and urban jungles, the diversity of life on our planet seems impossible to measure. But if you add microbes into the mix, some studies estimate upwards of 1 trillion unique organisms inhabit our world. Biodiversity is essential to human life as it sustains ecosystems we depend on, supports food security with pollination, provides medicines, regulates climate, drives economies, preserves cultural heritage, and enhances resilience against natural disasters. In its simplest form, biodiversity is the variability of life on Earth, and there are different types, including species diversity, ecosystem diversity, and genetic variability, a complex web of life, interconnected and interdependent, as explained by the United Nations.
Picture a forest, full of trees, plants, and animals, all working together. The trees hold the soil in place, their roots soaking up water. Leaves flourish, fruits ripen, animals feed, and their young grow strong. This biodiversity is the foundation of our land, but its balance is under threat. As we lose fertile land to degradation and drought, the tapestry of life starts to break down. Habitats disappear, species struggle to survive, food and water become scarce, and the whole system collapses. You see, desertification isn't just about losing land. It's about losing life that depends on that land. It's happening faster than we think, but hope is not lost. By protecting and restoring our land, biodiversity can bounce back. Planting trees, using water wisely, and sustainable farming are all part of the solution.
According to the United Nations, the main driver of biodiversity loss revolves around changing land use, usually for food production. That causes habitat destruction. But climate change is playing an increasingly pivotal role as it alters marine, terrestrial, and freshwater ecosystems around the world, throwing off nature's fragile balance. Examples include coral reef bleaching from rising ocean temperatures and drier weather contributing to raging wildfires. Biodiversity can have a huge impact on human health as naturally occurring chemicals can become the basis of groundbreaking medical treatments. For example, Madagascar periwinkle and the Pacific yew tree may be nice to look at, but both plants contain chemicals used in cancer-fighting drugs. And this red and black lizard may look like a monster because it is. The Gila monster is one of only 2 venomous lizards in the world, and it turns out that its venom provided the basis of the GLP-1 family of diabetes and weight loss drugs known by brand names like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Zepbound. Biodiversity isn't just a big-picture global issue, there are local implications as well. For example, the New York City Parks Department says that the city is home to 212 species of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and insects that are endangered, threatened, or of special concern and depend on the preservation of the city's 20,000 acres of wildlife habitat for survival. And over the years, we've told many of those stories here at CUNY TV. I'm Andrew Falzone for Sustainability Matters.
I'm joined now by 3 experts working to protect biodiversity in a changing world. Mariellé Anzelone is an urban botanist and the founder of New York City Wildflower Week. She works to preserve native flora in cities and helps New Yorkers discover the surprising diversity all around them. Christopher Blair is the executive officer of the biology PhD program at the CUNY Graduate Center and a professor of biology at both the Graduate Center and City Tech. His research explores evolutionary relationships and biodiversity through the lens of genetics, particularly in reptiles and amphibians. Mauricio Gonzalez is the founder and director of the New York Harbor Seals program, where students get to study the effects of emerging contaminants and novel sustainable materials on biodiversity. He's the recipient of the New York City Teacher of the Year Big Apple Award. Welcome to you all. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
So we just heard from Andrew talking about biodiversity. Can you all talk a little bit about what you're working on and how that impacts New Yorkers?
Sure. So I'm a botanist, so I work with plants. It's easy to fall in love with animals, especially ones that have wings or do charismatic things. And plants are maybe a little harder, or you have to be, a little quieter and spend a little more time. But plants have really interesting stories to tell. New York City has maybe 1,700 different kinds of plants growing here. And the majority of them, so let's say like 70% of them, are native.
Did you say 70% are native?
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, I'm looking forward to talking more about that. Chris, you're focused on genetics.
Yes. So my research broadly looks at how biodiversity on Earth evolved. Essentially, how does one species turn into two turns into four, and so forth. So I study that using genetics. So, what my students and I do is we go out into the field, we collect tissue samples, mostly from reptiles. I work a lot with lizards and snakes. We bring those tissue samples back to my lab here in New York City. We extract the DNA, and then we compare the DNA sequences among different groups to see who's related to whom, when divergence took place. And right now, we're in what we call this genomics revolution. It's very cheap to obtain whole genome sequence data from everything. So, that's giving us unprecedented genomic information for, what biodiversity is there and how it evolved.
Okay. So it's going to help us understand how we can protect certain species and how we might be able to...
Right, we can't protect it if we don't know what's there to begin with.
Amazing. And you're working at the Harbor School, so you're going out to Governor's Island. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're teaching your students?
Yeah, sure. In the Harbor School, we focus on understanding the chemical parameters that sustain the biodiversity of the harbor. And then we also start working with the base of the food web, which are plankton, and how microplastics might be affecting the plankton. And then setting out experiments on the harbor to attract marine invertebrates. And all those three things, they actually interact with each other very closely, because the invertebrates need the plankton to survive and eat, and the plankton and the invertebrates need the right kind of chemistry in the harbor. And then, start talking about all the various problems that still exist, that play a crucial role in how that biodiversity is protected and cared for.
A great point, as we live in this sort of urban setting, it's very hard to see the biodiversity around us. Are there particular species, plants, animals that you have uncovered or that you're seeing in New York City that maybe folks would be surprised to know exist, or are particularly important, you think, in terms of protecting our biodiversity? Maybe Marielle, you could get us started.
Sure. I guess I would say for plants, I think it's interesting to note that New York City has a number of globally rare plants that live here. One of them, sea beach amaranth, is actually on the federal endangered species list. In New York, it's only on Long Island, and it's on a number of other islands along the eastern seaboard. And that plant is interesting because it does not like to be trampled at all. So while it grows on beaches, sea beach amaranth, it actually grows in areas where piping plovers are. So when areas are cordoned off to protect the birds in their nesting habitat, there's a nice symbiosis with protecting the plant and its germination sites also.
Draw for us sort of the line about why protecting these plants is important. How does that impact sort of the rest of our ecosystem?
You know, like really big picture, New York City's already lost a number of plants. And, you know, a long time, you know, maybe like 10 years ago, I wrote this op-ed in the New York Times about plants that were extirpated in the city, including eelgrass. And I got like hate mail from people essentially like, well, you're an idiot. Of course we've lost plants around the city. Like that's what the city is. And, you know, yes, but we can think about, you know, doing development in ways that's also harmonious for habitat for rare plants.
I teamed up with a naturalist, his name is Bart Chazar, and he was trying to tackle the problem of bringing eelgrass back to New York City, which had been extirpated, like Marielle said.
So you mentioned eelgrass, and you also mentioned eelgrass. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the importance of eelgrass.
All grasses, including even, all marine grasses, are really critical as nursery grounds for a lot of organisms, and also to absorb a lot of the nutrients that come in from the land, that leach through the waterfront into the land, and in a sense filter the water and allow other organisms that are more sensitive to those nutrients to live. And so when you don't have a critical amount of this plant, it gets overwhelmed by a lot of the herbivores or the organisms that forage on them, like different snails that will live on them and lay their eggs on them, and then they'll overwhelm the plant. And another thing that you mentioned, Marielle, about how, you know, someone called in and said that, hey, that's what cities are all about. You know, we're not meant to have wildlife here. It's possible to bring both together, a city and to bring biodiversity, because we've actually seen it happening. It's happening today. More species of marine organisms are coming back because of simple policy decisions like banning DDT or PCBs or regulating herbicides and pesticides, and the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and all the initiatives that we've taken that we actually are starting to see some organisms that are important for the food web and are at the top of the food web coming back to New York City.
So you were describing sort of a tactical effort, right, to help expand the eelgrass so that you could help that ecosystem to thrive. What are some of the other things that we can do tactically or from a policy perspective to help ensure biodiversity?
You know, I guess the first question that, you know, we need to inform people about is, what is biodiversity? Right? Because I think a lot of people out there don't know. And, you know, biodiversity can mean very different things.
The number one threat to biodiversity on Earth is habitat loss. The second is habitat degradation. And what is degradation? It's a lot of times invasive species, more broadly like urbanization. But yeah, you see these things playing out everywhere. So in some ways, New York City is a microcosm, you know, for what's going on everywhere else. Yeah, in the plant world, that's no different. You know, walking through the woods, you see tons of invasive plants, you know, and people unfortunately are very like ecologically illiterate, broadly speaking. And they see green things and they're like, oh, look, it's green. Like, no, you don't know what that is though. So this sense of being able to walk through and see all the problems is a little bit of a problem, because also no one wants to hear it. There's not enough funding, there's not enough resources put towards it. We need solutions for biological diversity in terrestrial systems, and we're not finding them.
What is the scale of the crisis here in New York City, and how do you see it globally?
So, you know, from a plant perspective and a terrestrial perspective, and then talking about biodiversity policy, I was lucky enough in December 2022 to attend COP15, which was the biodiversity COP. Attending that conference was amazing because it was like 15,000 people from every corner of the globe, like tiny little places, in places that have developing economies, you know, in Africa, in South America. I mean, people from every corner, like feverishly interested, excited, determined to do something about saving biological diversity. And you know who's not at that table is the US. The US is one of the only countries in the world to not have been party to that. So, the richest country in the world isn't paying their dues. The, most powerful person on the planet, the head of the US, is not talking about biodiversity. It doesn't get picked up in the media.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo that. I have colleagues in countries all over the world, and their governments support biodiversity research much more than ours. And it's worse now than it's ever been. A lot of the drugs that pharmaceutical companies develop, there's animal or plant source there. Mm-hmm. Plants are a great example, but even animals. A lot of snake venom is used to create a lot of drugs for people, mm-hmm. and most people would have no idea about that. So if we lose these species, lives are going to be at stake in more ways than one.
And as you're looking at the genetics of these reptiles, are you also able to see how climate might impact those reptiles?
Yeah, so reptiles are what we call ectotherms. So unlike mammals, they can't regulate their body temperature internally. So they're kind of at the mercy of their environment, right? So as the climate warms, it's really threatening these species and populations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to add to that, I think it's important to highlight the importance of biodiversity for just well-being, general well-being for people. And when there's a lack of biodiversity in a biological system, those systems are usually more fragile and more prone to diseases and more prone to collapsing. When there's more biodiversity, those systems are more robust, resilient. The organisms tend to balance each other out. And also for people, even if we're talking about mental health, existence of enough trees around a city, in a sense, has an effect where a lot of the particles that are emitted from cars and smokestacks from heating in buildings, it gets, in a sense, it gets filtered out. And so we breathe cleaner air if we have biodiversity around us. And so there's a lot of connections to human health.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all, we're one big system. We're all interconnected. Have any of you seen some great examples of successes, whether it be policy or research or work that's being done here in the city that you can talk to us a little bit about? Maybe Mauricio, you could start.
About 13, 14 years ago, I came across a partner or industry partner called eConcrete, and they were experimenting with different types of cement that actually attract marine organisms. Because if you put it in water, which we now do on a yearly basis, we actually see marine organisms attracting, and a whole ecosystem created around these structures. And this company is now working with the city all around to create ecosystems in the waterfront. Whereas before you would have a sea wall, which was void of life. Mm-hmm. Now we're thinking about actually adding complexity as you move into the harbor and under the harbor. Wow. And without a doubt, that is increasing the biodiversity around the harbor for marine organisms.
So, my work is not focused in New York City, but an example I use, so there's a project I'm working on right now with lizards out west, and there's a species of lizard that's restricted to sand dune habitats of Texas and New Mexico. It's actually conserved by the federal government. So, there's no drilling for oil in these regions of the state because the species is protected. Wow. So the federal government has a lot of interest in the conservation status of this species.
Marielle?
New York City is the only global city that does not have biodiversity policy. And I'm laughing because I still can't, it's like so ridiculous. In a place that prides itself on really leading and to be so behind. So I'm working with a group of other folks on a New York City biodiversity task force. We worked on having people from different sectors of city life, especially grassroots organizations, where we're focusing on looking at biodiversity across the city and also centering overlooked populations of both people and communities throughout the city.
I'm just thinking about some of the policies that I've seen come out of the city, like increasing our tree canopy, for example. When you look at those types of policies, do you feel that they are supporting biodiversity, or are they?
No.
They're neutral in terms of the types of trees, or?
Well, I mean, or it could be negative in terms of the types of trees. Like, one of the things that's happening now is that thinking about climate change, you know, the city is interested in, city agencies are interested in planting, like, for future landscapes, right? So they're interested in planting species from the southeastern U.S. But some of those have proven to be invasive. So there's that concern. Another concern is that planting species that have no relationship to wildlife that lives here now is not going to help wildlife that lives here now. There's someone who does a lot of work in this. His name is Douglas Tallamy. He's an entomologist. He's really well known. He's written best-selling books. And he's found that birds, when they're babies in the nest, eat essentially only insects. 96% of North American birds. And the insects that they eat are largely caterpillars. And caterpillars only eat native plants, like 90% of the time. And he's had graduate students do work that have shown that if there aren't enough trees that are native in a landscape, chickadees, which are very, very tiny, they need up to maybe 9,000 individual caterpillars to feed 3 baby birds and fledge the nest.
Wow.
Are there enough trees to produce enough caterpillars to feed these birds? And the answer is no. So, I mean, that's the scale, you know, that we need to be thinking about in order to save a lot of the systems that go on around us. There's all this research, you know, a 2019 paper that Canada and America have lost, you know, billions of birds, 2.9 billion birds. And a paper just came out in March around losing our butterflies in the US, 30% loss of butterflies. So, you know, these numbers are really staggering, but there's so many things that we could be doing in the city. But then we think about trees only as infrastructure. Trees are not thought of as being biological entities in and of themselves. So
one of the things that we could be doing is trying to make sure that the policies we are creating are thinking about the systems approach that you just
Right, described. Exactly. And so we need to unsilo biodiversity. It needs to be, you know, every agency needs to be thinking about it. So there's a big game of catch up.
Yeah. What gives you hope?
People who are a little bit younger than me give me hope. You know, I'm a Gen Xer, and when I would go to parties when I was like in my 20s and told people I was a botanist, they were like, okay. And no one was interested. And now, you know, people who are in their 20s and 30s are really interested in this, in finding out what wildflowers they can plant in their gardens to help attract native pollinators. So that's really great.
It is great. Chris, what can educators do? And
yeah, I mean, it's just kind of sparking that interest,
Yeah.
you know? So this topic is just so foreign to a lot of students from the city, you know? It's, you know, they synonymize biology with medicine for a lot of things, right? Because, you know, a lot of them haven't been exposed to biodiversity before. So it's just really planting that seed and, you know, even taking them out, even just around the city to show them some of the local biodiversity.
Yeah, and to zoom out a little bit, we already discussed the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the banning of PCBs and DDT, and more recently, the regulation and banning of glyphosate, Roundup, as an herbicide, which attacks microorganisms, and the banning of plastic bags here in New York City. And if we follow through with all of that, it's only good news. Because we have so many examples of how past policy has already improved and made our ecosystem healthier.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for what you're doing and for the information that you're getting to our next generation and for sitting with us here today. And I hope to continue talking with you all going forward. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks a lot.
Please keep the conversation going. Follow us or send us a message on social media. And if you haven't, download the CUNY TV app. Join us next time as we continue to explore the most pressing environmental challenges of our time right here on Sustainability Matters.